So when OPC, we started in 1995, it was about moving data from the first tier devices and process control and factory automation to the first tier visualization application. And for some reason, my slides are auto-advancing. So I apologize for that. I guess this is, from an OPC Foundation perspective, we're an international organization. The majority of my membership is actually based in Europe, over 50%. It's all about security and reliability and interoperability. I have offices in Arizona, an office in Europe, China, Japan, and we're currently opening offices in both Korea and in India. So it's a very strong international organization. We've got a little over 4,500 companies that actually build OPC products, and I've got about 45 million installations, and that's rapidly going to change because of the things we're doing specifically related to the Internet of Things. I'm assuming that a lot of you have already heard about this IoT thing and how exciting this is about having connectivity between applications and devices. Well, one of the things that's very interesting about this is it's connectivity between devices also needs something called passing information in between them so that both sides can understand this in an intelligible way. So from an OPC Foundation perspective, we understand that the whole concept of IoT and IoT and M2M and B2B really needs the importance of the information integration and security as being part of this. So we're actually working with all the IoT protocols, whether it's AMQP or DDS or MQTT, essentially to provide the layer on top of them that gives semantic interoperability. I'm glad to see that we had our friends from Allotrope here. We've actually been partnering with them to do a collaboration, essentially to take their data and information and model it together. From an overall world, everybody's been talking about a service-oriented architecture. I'm proud to say that the activities we're doing related to Industry 4.0 and also the activities inside of the U.S., well, in North America with the IIC, really are standardizing on standards. When I started OPC in 1995, it was a vendor-driven initiative. Essentially, a bunch of vendors got together and saying, you know what, we want to have interoperability between different vendors' equipment, a multi-vendor environment. How did I get to 4,500 vendors now? Because now the end users have spoken. The engineers of today, okay, have now recognized from consumer electronics the importance of multi-vendor interoperability. And when they go to places where they say, oh, you've got to pay people special amounts of money to make interoperability between multi-vendor equipment, they all say, what? Why are we doing this? So that's the premise behind this. So end users are driving behind it. I've got major initiatives with the pharmaceutical guys right now in areas of serialization. All the pharma companies have partnered together essentially to develop an industry standard based on OPC-UA to address serialization. I'm working with the ExxonMobil guys specifically, are doing things with Lockheed Martin and something called the Open Group. They're doing the same thing. They're building a system leveraging OPC-UA as the core infrastructure to basically render data and information from the embedded world to the enterprise. So what we're talking about is really we have OPC-UA, and then underneath OPC-UA, we have a whole concept of all these other different protocols that are out there that address the technology. We build it on a client-server architecture. Basically, it's a service-oriented architecture where you have simple ways of reading and subscribing to data. But the important thing is we can actually build in that green box there what's known as the companion information models. And those companion information models essentially are things like allotrope. They're things like what's going on in the oil and gas community. They're things like the pharmaceutical. They're things like packaging where there's an industry standard and they're using OPC-UA as the mechanism to actually have connectivity and communication between devices and application. We started UA in 2003. Essentially, it's about platform independence. You know, it's built on top of all the internet architectures. And, you know, it has this generic object model that is the foundation of collaboration that allows us to partner with all these different organizations. Security is probably the biggest thing in addition to information modeling. It's an IEC standard, and it's all really about moving data from the embedded world to the cloud. In addition to that, we have decided to open up our standard You don't have to be a member of OPC to build products. It's an IEC standard, which is very important in the European market. Essentially, we've also open sourced all the technology on GitHub. Microsoft has also open sourced a version of OPC UA specifically for what's known as the Windows 10 IoT Core. Microsoft is standardized on OPC UA as their interface to Azure. SAP is doing the same thing with HANA. Oracle's doing similar things. So my board of directors includes small companies like Honeywell, Yokogawa, Microsoft, SAP, Yokogawa. You get the premise. So when you ask about why, Microsoft is committed, they're committed to OPC because they want to show the ability to actually plug and play into the industrial world, and they're leveraging this as their mechanism for integration of data into the cloud. I have a brochure that's out there that I passed out. It's our blue brochure that talks a lot of things. From an IEC standard, OPC UA is listed in the reference architecture. If you hadn't heard of the IIC, the Industrial Internet Consortium, go look them up. Essentially, there's a lot of development going on across industries deliberately. OPC UA is part of their key architecture, essentially, to move this forward. It's also, we're working to make it a Chinese national standard. Obviously, that's very important in China. I have a large installed base of manufacturers in there. I'm currently working with Korea deliberately. We've got a whole industry innovation 3.0 architecture out there, and that's part of that. The German government, as part of Industry 4.0, the Federal Office of Security, has basically referenced and said OPC UA has been analyzed, and OPC UA is the only solution, essentially, that meets the needs of Industry 4.0 from a security perspective. This is a list of some of the collaborations that we're doing. I mentioned we're doing pharma. I mentioned we're doing oil and gas. I mentioned we're doing packaging. We're doing all these other industries, essentially, to model their data using the OPC UA technology. It's all end-user driven. There's many demonstrations of the technology, but most important is it's a highly adopted standard. I guess the benefit of being out there since 1995 and the technology is that we've got this ability to essentially, collaborate with lots of other organizations. We're doing a lot of things even in the home market and with building automation. This is very important. Honeywell has got a whole list of thermostats out there that it has embedded UA into these things deliberately. Everybody's talking about, you know what this thing is really called? The analysts tell me, quit calling this a smartphone. You know why? Because our children and grandchildren, they don't use it as a phone. You ever see them talking on the phone? They use it as an information source. It's about information integration. We use it the same way. Think how the market is, there probably are a few people in the room that still remember paper maps. How many people remember paper maps? You realize how old you are by saying that? I mentioned that to my children. They say, what's a paper map for, Dad? Isn't that something like we just read about? And that's where you find out where these places are? No, this is the way we used to navigate around. Then we went to GPSs, right? And we had the standalone GPSs that only served GPSs. What happened to the GPS market? Same thing. Now it's all on your smart device, right? You want to navigate around, you just say, okay, Google or whatever, right? Or how many people know what Alexa is? Okay, guess what? You're part of the new core of information integration at its finest. So with that, I promised you I'd be close to my 10 minutes. There's an OPC brochure I left down on the table that gives you kind of an overview of OPC UA. It also talks about all the different testimonials out there. Again, small companies like HP, Dell, how they're using the OPC UA technology addressing industrial automation. So with that, I apologize. My slides were animation mode. I had to keep jumping around, but I guess my colleague did that deliberately. All right, thank you very much for your time.